Hello, the young and the restless spoilers. There comes a point in every downward spiral where even the person who has been fighting reality, the hardest, can no longer outrun what they have done, and for Mariah Copeland, that point arrives with a quiet, shattering clarity that feels less like a decision and more like collapse. For weeks she has been running on fumes of delusion and desperation, clinging to Dominic Winters as if he were the last solid object in a world that keeps dissolving under her feet. What began as a moment of rational impulse hardened into a full-blown kidnapping. And while she tried to tell herself that she was protecting him, that she was rescuing both of them from a life of constant anxiety and disappointment, the truth has been gnawing at her in the sleepless hours between one paranoid thought and the next. Dominic is not her child. He is not the answer to the hollow ache she has been carrying around for longer than she is willing to admit. He is a baby ripped away from the arms of two people who love him without condition, and their screams may not have reached Mariah's hiding place, but their pain has been echoing in every corner of her conscience. Since the moment she slipped away with him, for Abby Winters, the nightmare is as immediate as it is primal. One moment she is a mother going through the exhausting routines of early parenthood, balancing fear, joy, and uncertainty the way only new parents can. In the next moment she is a woman whose arms are empty, whose house has become a crime scene, whose heartbeat never really slows down anymore. There are no words big enough to hold the kind of terror that comes with not knowing where your child is, whether he is safe, whether he is warm, whether he is crying for a voice that cannot reach him. Devin Winters is living a parallel hell, his own connection to Dominic twisting inside him like a wound that refuses to close. The legal categories: biological parent, gestational carrier, legal guardian, all fall away under the weight of one simple truth: he is a father whose son has been taken. And every passing hour tightens the vice of helplessness. They replay every conversation with Mariah, every small moment that might have been a clue, scouring their memories for something they missed, hating themselves for every sign they failed to interpret correctly. The police updates feel mechanical and distant, coldly procedural in the face of a grief that feels anything but orderly. Abby and Devin are united in their desperation, but united suffering does not lessen its intensity. It only becomes a shared storm, roaring louder each time one of them falters and the other tries to be strong. Mariah, meanwhile, has been living inside a distorted reality where fear and fantasy have fused into something that feels like truth even as she senses its wrongness. She has been lost for a long time, drifting between identities, roles, and expectations, telling herself that if she just found the right person to cling to, the right purpose to wrap herself around, the inner chaos would finally quiet down. Dominic, small and defenseless, became that purpose almost before she realized what was happening. In the stillness of the nights that followed, when the world narrowed down to the sound of his breathing and the rhythm of his fragile heartbeat, Mariah convinced herself that she could begin again, that the version of her life that kept slipping through her fingers could be rebooted, if she just made a drastic enough choice. The presence of Ian Ward in her mind was like gasoline poured onto smoldering embers. He did not need to be physically present to be dangerous. The memory of his control, his twisted philosophy, his skill at reframing abuse as salvation was enough to revive him in the crevices of her psyche. His voice, or rather her internal echo of it, told her that she and Dominic were meant to escape together, that they were bound by trauma and fate, that she was not stealing someone else's child but rescuing her own soul. Ian, in her fractured imagination, behaved as though the universe had finally corrected a long-standing mistake. By placing Dominic in her arms and removing the noise of everyone else's claims and demands, he whispered, in that oily cadence that once drove her to the edge of annihilation, that this child needed her more than he needed Abby or Devin, that they were both misfits in the world they had been born into, and that out there away from Genoa City, away from judgment, away from the complex tangle of contracts and expectations they could start over. Even as Mariah's rational side recoiled, knowing on some deep instinctive level that nothing about this narrative was right, the fantasy offered something dangerously seductive, a reality in which she was not the broken one, the expendable one, the one who was always reacting to everyone else's choices, but someone decisive and central. In that illusion, she was the protector, the savior, the person brave enough to grab happiness with both hands, no matter what anyone thought. But reality has a way of seeping through even the most carefully constructed fantasy. And as days blur into nights, the cracks in Mariah's story become too wide to ignore. Dominic's cries are not cries of recognition or destiny. They are the cries of a frightened child ripped from his routine, from the scent and heartbeat of the mother he knows as mom. Abby's absence hangs over every moment, not as a judgment, but as a missing piece that no amount of forced affection can replace. Mariah can feel it in the way Dominic startles at unfamiliar sounds, in the restless way he sleeps, in the way his tiny body tenses whenever her own anxiety spikes. She has flashes of Abby's face, desperate and hollow-eyed, of Devon's shoulders bowed under the weight of a guilt he does not deserve. And each flash chips away at her ability to keep pretending that what she is doing is anything other than selfishness dressed up as survival. The emotional strain becomes unbearable, a pressure that wraps around her ribcage and makes it hard to breathe. The hallucinations of Ian, once a twisted comfort, begin to turn on her. His imagined approval morphs into mockery, his false assurances into accusations. If she falters, he tells her in that voice no one else can hear, she will prove once again that she is weak, that she doesn't deserve a new life, that she is nothing without a crisis to define her. But for the first time, Mariah begins to question not just the content of the hallucinations, but their right to speak at all. Why is she still allowing the ghost of an abuser to dictate the terms of her existence? Why is she willing to sacrifice Dominic's safety, Abby's sanity, Devon's peace of mind, just to avoid facing the terrifying emptiness of her own unresolved trauma? These questions do not come with easy answers, but their very presence signifies a turning point. Mariah is no longer only defending her actions, she is starting to interrogate them. The outside world closes in, not with the sound of sirens battering down a door, but through the simple, inescapable fact that hiding is no longer sustainable. Supplies run low. The secluded space she has chosen begins to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a prison cell she built herself. Each time Dominic's whimpering escalates into full-blown wailing, a shard of reality cuts through the layers of denial. She is not protecting him from chaos, she is the chaos. The idea of handing him back still terrifies her, because it means stepping into a flood of consequences, legal, emotional, relational. It means facing Abby's devastation, Devon's anger, Sharon's disappointment, the police's cold precision as they document her wrongdoing. It means relinquishing the illusion that she and Dominic are bound by fate in some special, unbreakable way. But it also means giving Dominic back his life, and with that realization, a different kind of fear begins to take root, one that is not about losing him, but about what will happen to him if she doesn't. The decision to surrender ultimately comes not in a blaze of dramatic confrontation, but in the quiet, exhausted moment where Mariah realizes there is no version of this story where she keeps Dominic and lives with herself. Her emotional threshold has been crossed. She has cried until there are no tears left, paced until her legs ache, argued with voices that only she can hear. When she finally picks Dominic up and holds him close, it is not with the desperate possessiveness of someone trying to cling to what isn't hers, but with the gentle, trembling acceptance of someone saying goodbye. She presses her cheek against his head, inhaling the scent that has become so painfully familiar, and whispers promises he will never remember, that she is sorry, that she was wrong, that his life is bigger than her pain. Then she does the hardest thing she has ever done. She walks toward the very people she has spent weeks running from, turning herself into the police as both a punishment and a release. The station's fluorescent lights feel harsh and unforgiving, the paperwork clinical in its dissection of what she has done. But beneath the formalities is a strange, fragile sense of relief. There are no more lies to maintain, no more hiding places to guard, no more nightly negotiations with her own mind. Mariah tells the truth, or as much of it as she can bear to say out loud, about the kidnapping, the hallucinations, the way she wrapped her need for Dominic in a cloak of false destiny. because she was too afraid to admit how broken she still felt. The officers listen, some with impatience, some with muted sympathy. But the law is not built to measure heartbreak or trauma. It can only measure actions. Mariah understands this, and she does not argue. She has done the unforgivable, even if she never meant to physically harm Dominic. Intentions do not negate impact. She accepts that she will face legal consequences, that she will likely lose the trust of people she once considered family, perhaps for a very long time. For Abby and Devin, the moment Dominic is placed back into their arms is almost too big to fully process. Abby's first instinct is not to speak, not to rage, not to demand explanations, but simply to hold her son against her chest and feel the rise and fall of his breathing, the weight of him, the warmth of him, the soft sounds he makes as he burrows instinctively into the familiar curve of her body. All of it hits her with such force that her knees nearly give out. Devin stands at her side, one hand on Dominic's back, the other braced against Abby's shoulder as if grounding them both. The questions, the anger, the fear that he has been holding inside spill out later in quieter conversations and restless nights. In this first reunion, there's only gratitude and a raw, almost animal relief that their son is alive and back where he belongs. Yet even as Dominic returns home, the ordeal is far from over. He may be too young to understand the specifics of what happened, but his little nervous system has recorded the disruption. Doctors will need to examine him thoroughly, checking his physical health, monitoring his responses to stimuli, making sure that the stress of the separation has not manifested in ways that require longer-term attention. Abby and Devin will have to rebuild routines that have been shattered, reestablish a sense of safety in a world that has proven itself capable of ripping their child away. In an instant, every time Dominic startles at a sudden noise or wakes crying in the middle of the night, they will wonder if it is a lingering echo of what he experienced while he was gone. For Mariah, the path forward is even more complicated. She cannot undo what she has done, but she can choose what kind of person she will be in the aftermath. Surrendering to the authorities is only the first step. The deeper, lonelier work will happen later. In therapy sessions where she is forced to unpack the scars Ian Ward left in her psyche. In long hours of introspection where she faces the parts of herself she tried to outrun. By clinging to Dominic, she will have to accept that her pain does not entitle her to someone else's child. That survival does not excuse every choice made in the name of survival. Maybe, in time, she will be able to make amends in ways that feel meaningful, even if forgiveness never fully arrives. Maybe Abby and Devin will reach a point where they can acknowledge not only the damage she caused, but the brokenness that led her there. Or maybe the best she will ever get is the knowledge that she eventually did the right thing, even if she did it far too late. What is certain is that Dominic Winters, the tiny, unknowing center of this storm, ultimately returns to where he is meant to be, in the care of the parents who have fought for him. From the beginning, Abby, the woman he calls mom, and Devin, the father whose name he carries, will be the ones to guide him through the next stages of his life. But before that peace can fully settle, Dominic must pass through the shadow cast by what has happened, the medical checkups, the worried glances, the quiet promises whispered over his crib at night that he will never be taken again. This ordeal becomes a defining chapter in his origin story before he is even old enough to speak. A reminder to everyone involved of how fragile the line is between love and possession, between protection and control, between a desperate act and an unforgivable crime. In the end, Mariah's surrender does not erase the nightmare she created, but it does draw a line under it, allowing healing to begin slowly, painfully, imperfectly, but undeniably as Dominic's small hands curl around the fingers of the people who were always meant to be his family.